Before I introduce Phil, I want to just remind us that next week starts March, and we have a full Sunday Forum schedule for March, which is pretty unbelievable. We're going to starting with teen empowerment next week, who will be speaking to us here. And then March 9th, it will be the first of two forums that will be dedicated to the issue of the Carson Mauser congregational meetings. The first one will be talking about church history. And if there are any volunteers to look through church history, raise your hand soon. And the second week, the 16th, is the microphone working? You need to turn up the Zoom.
Helen, thank you. I thought it was new. I got my computers now. I can hear. Well, the chief thing though, is that there are two, but nothing stuff for, it's not so helpful. I think it's not, I was saying, testing, but.
You don't have any filter about it.
I never changed any other.
Is that volume better? Is that any better?
Yes.
So March 9th with the Carson Mauser group to talk about church history, and March 16th it will be that other project that Pat will need to describe more as she'll be sending out eConnect messages have to do with the finding a biblical narrative that helps to describe where we are for the church. And then on the 23rd, Eastern Service Workers Association will come here and speak. And then March 30th will be Rob Brown and Lori O'Brien will be from the Teleska Center for Justice will be speaking here. And on top of that, there's going to be a midweek forum that we're going to try by Zoom, not in person, but a group called the Climate Solutions Accelerator showed interest, contacted Gail, of course, to make a presentation, but they're trying not to work on weekends. So they agreed to do something on a weekday, and it's either going to be March 12th, a Wednesday, or March 13th, a Thursday, and I'll be sending out a Zoom link for that. People seem to be interested in this modern way of doing things, Zoom only. And now, so I'm going to introduce Phil Davis. Phil is modest, and said months ago when the Forum Committee first asked him to describe his spiritual journey, he said there wasn't much to say. And I suppose there's not much to say in the end, but I wonder how he came to such a simple conclusion. And we'll find more about his journey today and how the meanderings have resulted finally in a simple conclusion that there's not much to say. And what I do know about him comes mostly from the work that we did with the Pastoral Interview Committee about a year ago. He went to City University of New York at Hunter College as an undergraduate. His first career was actually in information technology, IT. That was 20th century IT. Then at some point, he went to get a master's at Union Theological Seminary, master's an MA in theological education. He served as an interim pastor at a number of Rochester area churches beginning in 2003. He's working with the East Rochester Presbyterian Church as well as Webster Presbyterian when those churches were in crises, dwindling congregations as well as interpersonal changes in the challenges in the congregations. He was married at one time to a renowned theologian who taught here at Colgate and then went on to Duke and to Howard, or Howard and to Duke. Gabe Byron is now deceased. She died about a year and 2 months ago. Her expertise was in liberation and womanist interpretations of the New Testament. Their marriage ended while his two sons were quite young still, and he made it a point to raise them in the city of Rochester mostly, and they attended the Rochester City School District. And they have now launched successful careers, having gone to Howard and to Penn. Phil continues to live in Rochester, and I said he walks to work, but he said he sometimes walks to work from a few blocks away. As we have heard from his sermons and in his Sunday Forum in November, his guiding principle is that God is love, and I think we would do well to test the truthfulness and the meaning of our human efforts by asking ourselves, is this love, and does this relieve suffering? And that's probably So Phil added a few things. The younger son is working in architecture, and the older son is teaching English in Japan and has been accepted to a graduate program in journalism. So anyway, we're looking forward to hearing what this red thread of meaning might be. What has uh, kept you together through all these years? Why there isn't much to say, but maybe that's saying everything. So.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning. When asked to do a presentation about my spiritual journey, I did not know what to expect. So I figured, well, I'll have the microphone, so I'll just say whatever I want to say. So, there are just a couple of first thoughts, some of which fall into the teaching and it's almost in the realm of kind of shock and awe as it might relate to, one's spiritual growth and one's spiritual journey. So I'll go through that. Then I'll go through just kind of like some biographical kind of stuff. And then some just kind of, depending upon time, just some pictures of my life recently. So there it says spiritual journey. So I struggle with this. But this is what happened?
You make.
I can hear myself just fine. I struggle with this. This is from the chapter 1 of the Old Testament prophet Jeremiah, who writes, who says to Jeremiah, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Now, and again, I'm just going to say, I struggle with that. But okay, now this is where this is going to get a little odd. Anybody recognize that picture? Huh?
The boy from Chicago was killed in Mississippi.
Right.
Got his name too.
Right, Emmett Till.
Yes.
That's Emmett Till. And if you, that was the picture. I won't keep that up there very long, but his mother, Mamie Till, had an open casket, funeral service, and the nation saw this picture. But not only did the nation see this picture, African-American mothers saw this picture. And I was in utero. I was in my mother's womb when Emmett Till was murdered, and that became national news. And it was a traumatizing moment in the life of African-American mothers, and I would hope for everybody. But, but I kind of wonder sometimes what impact, did that have on me? The information, you'll come across information that says, see, wait a minute. Let me have the microphone stand, please, then. Because I can't.
Really is good.
The expectations around here are pretty high. Next thing you know, they're going to be asking me to walk and chew gum. And that remark kind of characterizes what it's like being around here. Just plain. Okay, but this says when a mother experiences trauma, particularly during pregnancy, it can have a significant impact on the developing fetus, potentially affecting the child's physical and mental health in utero, leading to potential long-term consequences. This is often referred to as in utero or prenatal trauma exposure, with the primary mechanism being elevated levels of stress hormones like cortisol crossing the placenta to the fetus. You weren't expecting a biology lesson. But my point is that the experiences of mothers, the experiences of Black folks is, is dominated by stressful situations. It's dominated by them. And you got stuff coming at you left and right. But anyway, I wanted to kind of make that point, but just going a little bit further, this is what they say are the key effects of maternal trauma on a developing fetus. The effects are neurological, they affect growth and development. There are epigenetic changes, and those are kind of changes that kind of sneak into the genes as a consequence of environmental factors, and then potentially impact on the immune system. So anyway, my hypothesis here is that none of us have spiritual journeys that are independent of our social location. None of us have spiritual journeys that are independent of our race, our class, our gender, and whatever other category you might fit yourself into. But as that relates to my spiritual journey, well, there it says, Jeremiah's talking to me. And like I said, I struggle with this because to really take the voice for God is to pick up the cross. And to pick up the cross means Rome's coming for you in one way or the other. So I struggle with this. Okay, but so now this is the main thing I'm going to touch on here about, a spiritual event. And it happened in the chapel of St. Vladimir's Seminary. Now, how did I get to St. Vladimir's Seminary? So one of my classes at Union Seminary was a class in ecumenics. In ecumenics, the definitions there, ecumenics is the study of the Christian church as a global community and the practice of Christians working together for unity. So what is it? It's the idea that Christians from different denominations should work together to promote unity and closer relationships between their churches, also known as interdenominationalism. So in this class in ecumenics, I took, of all things, an interest in the Eastern Orthodox Church. And what struck me was this notion of the veneration of icons. And that kind of struck me as like, ooh, what's that about? But broadly, it's the practice of the contemplation of an image, some kind of sacred image, with the expectation that this contemplation will bring you closer to the holy. So I'm a faithful researcher, a good graduate student. So I make my trip up to St. Vladimir's bookstore to get some books about the veneration of icons. So I kind of rushed ahead. But the other thing I did while I was at St. Vladimir's was I went into their chapel. And these images do not come close to what the experience of being in St. Vladimir's chapel, with these icons, and this imagery. And I just got to tell you that I was literally overwhelmed by this sense of connection to that which is sacred and that which is holy. And it was like, and it's one of those experiences that I kind of hold on to because it really in like an incredibly powerful way for which I do not have the words, being close to God and being claimed by God. It was really just, like I said, quite an experience. I wish we could take a field trip to go there, but it's quite a haul. But maybe you would have the same sort of experience as I had. And again, I kind of summarize it. I pretty much said this already. My experience in the chapel at St. Vladimir's Seminary, it's unmatched. It's really unmatched by anything else that has happened. I mean, that's not to say I haven't had moments when it's like, I feel like I'm talking to God, but in this case, it was like God was like, okay, I got you. It was one of those, I got you. So anyway, so that's that. So there's me. Yeah, that's me. And I think that's my older sister standing against the wall. And, I might have been, I was that age, however old that age was, but I thought I'd stick that in there. And there's me again. What's it? Which one? Okay, I'm the guy in the brown beige colored jacket there with the, and I don't know who gave me that boot there. But this is my sixth grade graduation. This is my sixth grade graduation. On my right is Leroy Miller. Leroy's now deceased. I don't know exactly what happened to him. Oh, stay by the microphone. I'm telling you, this is, you guys asked for a lot. So that's me, the guy in the brown jacket. Next to me is Leroy Miller. Leroy is deceased. On the other side of me is Murray. Murray ended up being an illustrator for West Point. And what he said to me was, he said, they make it, impossible for those students at West Point not to understand a concept. So if there was something that they needed to understand, they got Murray to draw a picture. And then on the other side, I think that's a fellow by the name of George Gresham. George, you might recognize that name. He's, president of some chapter of SEIU. But I think that's George Gresham there. George, we were in the same sixth grade class. He lived, a block over from where I lived at that time. So let me just stop right now. Those are my parents. The top right-hand one, that's my parents at their honeymoon in Chicago. The one next to it, that's them 50 years later in I think it was in the Oakland Bay area. And then the one underneath that is just as a birthday party. I don't know whose birthday it was, but they got us together for a birthday party. That's my mom, before she knew my father for too long. Okay, so let me just stop this for a second. Because, I want to just kind of right now, take a moment and just, a little bit of history here of the kind that, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, okay. So, both my parents were. Both my parents were, AMEs, African Methodist Episcopal Church. Their parents were like best friends, and they were founding members of Campbell Chapel AME Church in Alton, Illinois. And that my family started out in Illinois, moved to Syracuse. And I asked my father why they left Alton, Illinois. And he said, he gave me two answers. He said, one, he didn't want my grandmother bossing him around all the time. And the other explanation was that Alton was a riverfront town, and it was a town where everybody did well. The Black people just got the worst jobs. There were high-paying jobs, but they were like the worst jobs. So he just said he wasn't going to work with that. So they moved from Alton to Syracuse, and at that point, my older brother and older sister were both born. They moved with them to Syracuse, and then they moved down to New York City. And then, my father got this entry-level position at IBM, very, entry-level position. And, he was working initially in Midtown Manhattan, and then they moved his job to Lower Westchester. So he figured there were two things going on. We were in Brooklyn at the time when, I don't know if it was the first wave, but one of the waves of, drug abuse was kind of hitting the neighborhood. So they said, okay, let's get out of here. So they moved up to Norwalk, Connecticut, and we were there and at that point, I was in the second grade. And then from there, they moved to and bought a house up in the Northeast Bronx. And, you know, one of the things that, one of the reasons I stayed put here in Rochester with my children was because I understood looking back the impact that these moves had on me and, you know, certainly, you know, and me and my siblings, because we never got really connected, you know, consistently to to a community. So, you know, to that end, it's like I've stayed put. You know, and my youngest son, when he had to, he felt comfortable coming back to Rochester. He has like the best friends. I mean, these guys, you know, these are the kids you want your kids around. I mean, just an amazing group. But anyway, that's kind of why I stayed put here. You know, because I could see the impact of like these relocations. Now,
You're fine.
what do,
Just to-
what do you
if
want now?
If you're using it, then the people can see you straight on.
Okay, all right. Okay, the, you know, so, you know, I mean, he had legitimate reason. It's like, okay, one, we're, you know, getting closer to his job, and then two, you know, and at least in leaving Brooklyn the first time, you know, getting out of a community that was like making a transition to being like not the best place to be. You know, but what I want to say now, it was in 1964 when they moved to the Bronx. And if you remember, that was the height of the Civil War and the height of the Civil Rights Movement, those years there, those years. So me as, you know, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, I'm looking at one of the local news stations every night carried something called the Honor Roll. And the Honor Roll was a list of local young men who were killed while they were in service. So I'm looking at this every day. You turn on the news, and at the end of the news, it's like people are dying over there. And I remember, if you're familiar with the artist Les McCann, he had a song called "Compared to What," and that song, one of the lines in it is, "The president's got his war. Nobody knows just what it's for. Half of one doubt, and they call it treason." Okay, but I bring that up to say it made no sense to me. I'm kind of like, you know, life is pretty good. I don't want to put myself in a situation, or can't see why anybody would be put in a situation where where the possibility is they're gonna die. You know, but so that was kind of one of the things that that was coming at me. You know, the other thing is, kind of coming at me, was the reality of the civil rights movement, which was televised, televised, and, and I could see the church burnings. I could see the church bombings. As a matter of fact, in one of my church history classes, I wrote a paper on church burnings and church bombings. And I remember one of the things I remember about writing that paper was being, sitting with my head in a microfiche reading these articles about churches that had been burned and bombed, and in tears, in tears. Those machines. I was like, so anyway, that's kind of a part of how my consciousness, and my spirituality, was formed. And then throw into that watching, progressives and different radicals being murdered. I'm kind of like, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? Only to later find out that, that was the work of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI. And, you mentioned it, the COINTELPRO program, which, they were killed with the intent to silence somebody. It's like, maybe if young Davis, while he's watching the evening news, sees enough people getting murdered, maybe he won't say anything. So anyway, that was the the intent there. But one of the things that also, and this is one of the places where kind of family life, went a little bit haywire. Okay, I pushed the button. I can push the button now. So while they're waiting for which button to push, wait a minute, that's not the one I wanted. Okay, so this is my older brother. My older brother was the perfect older brother until he wasn't the perfect older brother. He was brilliant. He was athletic. And, went off to college and came back, with a diagnosis of schizophrenia. Now, and that's kind of, as you kind of hear about stuff, that's pretty much the way the path goes. They go from these amazing individuals to schizophrenic. But my parents, had no idea. None of us had any idea what we were looking at. So they're thinking it's a character defect, and kind of pushing back at him, for for that. For his behavior, that was manifesting itself. But that introduced a lot of chaos, into the life of the family. And so that's, but, and he's deceased now. Actually, he was in the hospital being, I think, reviewed or observed because he had some kind of urinary tract infection, and actually choked on a piece of food, and was his passing. But yeah, this is one, but just kind of looking back into that period of the 60s, that was one of the things that kind of really like weighed in on, my life and, my family's existence and well-being. And this, by the way, is a picture of my father's family, going from left to right, is his sister, Ruth, his sister Esther, his brother Dewey, his mother, that's my dad. And I don't know who that lady is. And seems like nobody, I mean, and lots of people have this picture, and nobody knows. I'm going to try again this evening. I'm going to call Ruth. I'm going to go, who is that standing? But anyway, so that's them. Yeah, and that's before they were married. But pictures got like shoved in here, and I'll talk about those, a bit more. But I'm going to turn this off now. Get off. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. So, I took a brief look at a form of Buddhism back in the 70s. And then my father, following his job, decided to move the family to Chicago. And then following his job, within 6 months, moved back to New York. And I was briefly enrolled in, at a city college in Chicago for a semester. And then, moved back to the Bronx, and I enrolled in at Hunter College, City University in New York. And then a few years later, went to work, and just a number of different kind of corporate gigs, mostly doing IT. Um, and then I just, I got tired of being supervised. You how parents do. Parents can be very annoying, and I mean, they were doing their job. I mean, I'm talking about my mother in particular. She was doing her job, trying to protect and make sure her kid didn't get all haywire. But anyway, I moved to Brooklyn. And there I got involved slash joined the Cornerstone Baptist Church. And what I remember one clear as a bell. I remember sitting there one Sunday and thinking, these people need help. And basically it was in the realm of, being stuck in this kind of, cultural dynamic, which I'm kind of like, it's time for you to move on. It's time, time to move on. But anyway, after that, these people need help experience at church, I enrolled in seminary thinking, oh, okay, maybe I can be helpful to churches. So then I finally graduated, and along the way, I had resolved not to do parish ministry. Um, I had kind of figured out who you guys are. And I said, nope, not for me. But apparently God had other plans, okay? Because as David mentioned, my ex-wife was an ordained Presbyterian minister. She was a scholar. She was, and when she got here, she met, yeah, anybody remember Edie Gauss?
Yes.
Yeah, Edie was the executive presbyter, and the executive presbyter asked about me, said, well, what's he doing? And I had, the tech job I had just been, well, not just, but had been sent overseas. And so I was kind of like, well, what comes next? And so when Edie said, come talk to her, I went and I talked to her. And the next thing you know, I was at the East Rochester Church. We came up here with my oldest child. And then I, went through like I, you've heard, I've served the East Rochester Presbyterian Church, the Lakeside Presbyterian Church, the Penfield Baptist Church. Let me just say this real quick. The Penfield situation was they just didn't allow a guy to make a rookie mistake. And they just abruptly canned them. But and so I would get in the middle of that. But then the Webster Baptist Church, and what was interesting, there was a Webster Baptist Church and then the Webster Presbyterian Church. And again, let me just remind you, I wasn't looking for any of this. But just, the cards lined up so that, okay, you come here. But it was really kind of odd because I spent however long it was at the Webster Baptist Church. And then when they finally found someone, within 2 weeks, I had gotten a phone call to come, because they needed somebody to do supply preaching. And so I went up there, I preached. And then they said, well, can you come back and stick around until we work stuff out around here? And, here I am here. But along the journey, like I said, I was, divorced my ex-wife, and may she rest in peace. And then the children moved, she got a job offer to be something professor, something down at Howard University. And she took that job, and then the children moved in with me. So let's see, what else do I have written here? So that's all I'm going to tell you. Now I'm going to show pictures. I'm going to show pictures. I wish we had more time for the pictures. So let's see, if I push the button here, what happens? I push the button. I guess I'll get my coffee now. So I'll just mention that the music you might have heard when you were coming in, it was a John Coltrane selection called Wise One. And my intent, when my second child was born, I said, this is going to be the first piece of music he hears. Now, it might not have been the first one, but it was, and maybe when we break up, you can play some more of it. Oh, the pictures are back. Yeah, but anyway, that's what that was, John Coltrane, Wise One. Okay, so that's me and my kids, and that's me in my happy place. I don't know how many years ago that particular picture was, but we've been, the three of us had been up that mountain, I don't know how many times. That's at the Rondex Fire Tower in the area around Old Forge. This is, you got to watch your kids when they're playing with snakes. I mean, no, I'll spare you the details, but that's the youngest one. That was a bunch of years ago. We participated in a project that was done by the University of Rochester and the Science Museum. They were working on this program of like kind of putting science on the family calendar. And what we ended up doing, this group that I was at, we decided to try to figure out what it would be like if there was an alien invasion. And we covered it from a whole lot of angles, which included, did you know it included Eric?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, we covered it. We spoke with, I forget the guy at this Channel 8, but we said, okay, from a journalist perspective, how do you handle the fact that there's been an alien invasion? From the perspective of a military, how do you handle a alien invasion? You know, from a health, public health perspective. It was really actually was, we were told we had, of all the groups, that our group, it was, us and, several other families, was the best presentation that they ever had. But of course, we had the kind of kids who would raise the question, what's an alien invasion like? You know? So anyway, that was that. Okay, so this was like maybe a year and a half ago, at a shrine somewhere in Japan. Now the curious thing was, I'm still trying to like, okay, what happened? So, the oldest one, the one on this side, he figured that while we were there, we needed to go see shrines. So that there were 3 shrines that he took us to. And so that's at a shrine. That's the same shrine up the hill. This is the older one, the day he graduated from Howard, or the day of the celebration. That's the younger one. At the graduation ceremony is at UPenn. And I don't know if you can tell if you can actually see what he's holding, but that's what the people in the architecture department had on the top of their heads. I thought it was kind of cool. Again, a different trip. We've been up that mountain a lot, But of course, the thing is like you go back to, you probably know this already, you go back to the same area enough times, you figure out where the good restaurants are. If you want to know, just ask me. So that's a picture of around those early days with the youngest one on my back. That's that's me and the same kid. He wouldn't go on my back. But I still have that sweatshirt and I still have that hat. Let's see. So that's it. That's all I got to. So I hope maybe there was something valuable that you can take from all of this, but I'm done. Thank you for your time.
And if you're up there with microphone, I can pass this for questions. Anybody have any questions, comments?
Something very basic. At what point in your life did you open your eyes and open your mind and say, I have a connection to the divine?
Almost from the beginning. I mean, because I was the kid who would like just look up at the sky and say, I don't have an explanation for this. And even going through, I spent a little bit of time as a physics student. And so, you got the people doing particle physics on the one hand in the department, and you got the astrophysicists, and on the other hand, looking at the universe. And for all the efforts that they make at trying to explain the universe, for me, they all come up short. They all come up short. I mean, just simply, so anyway, but to answer your question, from like early on, I'm kind of like, there's a God, and I ain't gonna try to mess with God, and I don't need to explain everything. I mean, it's all quite interesting. It's like, people, say, well, it's not exactly an orbit, it's a probability cloud, all of that stuff. But think about a probability cloud. Anyway, yeah, but early on.
Well, I'd be really interested to know how early on you were aware of racism in your life, or was it always there?
pretty early. It was clear to me, clear around the age of 6 or 7, it was pretty clear. The earliest memory of something that I interpreted as, a racial event was when we moved from Brooklyn to Connecticut. And I'm a second grader, the people paid a lot of attention to me. So here we go. So there was this event with one of the teachers where I'm kind of like, that was uncalled for. So I would say in the second grade, I was kind of like, wait a minute, that was uncalled for. And there's no other explanation but I can find besides the fact that I'm the new guy in this room and I'm also the new Black kid in the room, who, when they placed me, had placed me like at the top of the class. Yeah, by the way, one of the things, I entered college at 16 years old. Well, some of it has to do with being born late in the year, and the rest of it has to do with I was allowed to skip a grade. I was allowed to skip the 8th grade. And if you have family members with bright kids, don't allow that to happen because 2 things go wrong. One is emotionally, there's a difference, between somebody who's 12 years old and 13 years old. But then also physically, there's a difference as well. So now I played high school football. I'm just waiting for the total effects of all of those concussions I had to kick in. But I played high school football. But I'm out there with folks that are older than I am. So that was that's something I don't keep kids in this appropriate social group. But I hope that answers. Yeah, second grade. And it became increasingly apparent, as, as I mentioned, excuse me, just kind of watching the 60s unfold, And just one of the things I thought worth bringing, I mentioned church bombings and burnings. And okay, here's how small the world is. My cousin, Ruth, married a fellow by the name of Isom Beard. And Isom Beard was the son of Luke Beard, who was the pastor of the 16th Street Baptist Church, where the 4 little girls were killed. They bombed the building. Isom knew those kids. He knew those girls. But you kind of talk about, people degrees of separation. So you all are now just 4 degrees of separation, from those girls who were, murdered and bombed. And kind of, oh, by the way, so that paper that I did, and it's I got something else to do, I mentioned this paper I did on church burnings and bombings. And one of the things as I kind of scratched around, I found out that a policeman knew that this was going to happen. Okay. But didn't go investigate because he was parked somewhere with the woman he was having an affair with. I have the manuscript of this book. I don't know if I still have it, but somewhere around this is written down. As I think back to that, another conversation I had with a white pastor, who served in that area. He said that he always parked his car by a mailbox. He said, because if they blew up his car, it would blow up the mailbox too. And it would then become a federal crime.
Good strategy.
Anyway, I'm sorry. You were gonna.
I'm curious as to what changes you have seen or not seen in your boys growing up and in yours.
Practically none. And, because they can still have the experience that Trayvon Martin had.
Yeah.
They can still have that experience. So hardly any.
And did you have frequent conversations about that?
Often, anytime I felt, okay, I need to make a warning,
Mhm.
Yeah, they were not frequent, but they were not frequent, but, they were told what the deal was. Okay.
This is just an observation. You mentioned the Vladimir Seminary
Yes.
Chapel and the experience
Yeah.
that undescribable or indescribable. And that happens to me sometimes in our very sanctuary, the beautiful sanctuary with the art, the acoustics, and we'll be singing a hymn and the choir, the sopranos sing the descant. And I have to stop. It's an indescribable experience. So I relate to that.
Okay, great.
I will ditto that almost every Sunday, music and just the experience.
Okay, I see.
Any other, another questions?
Take this last question, and then I'm gonna go get ready for my next appointment.
And by the way, Reverend Phil's kids are fabulous boys, fabulous boys.
Yeah, I don't know, does anybody know that Nancy had a hand in being their Sunday school teacher for years and years and years and years and years? And I can't thank you enough. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. This is probably an open-ended question, but I'm something that is a strong interest to me that you alluded to in the beginning of your talk. And that is the impact of trauma. And you surmised that perhaps that even you in the womb may have been affected by trauma that your mother may have experienced. So this is more of a pedantic question. Do you or are you aware of a book called Under the Skin by Linda Villarosa?
No.
Okay, she talks about the medical impacts of repeated racial trauma on Black Americans. And I was wondering if you had read that book. So apparently you had not. But it's one that affected me and interested me immensely because she gets into the understanding and the statistical proof that people who would have no other medical indications tend to miscarry early or have difficulty in childbirth more, and actually die in childbirth more. And she relates this, and the book is documented and footnoted. It's an amazing study, so I would recommend this to people as well. So that's all I had to ask you about.
Two things, and I'm gonna go make my appointment.
I'm sorry?
Two things, and then I'm gonna go to my next appointment. So there's a book that's been sitting in my office. I read it. A buddy of mine recommended it to me. The title of the book is What Happened to You? And, it's almost one of those books I think everybody should read because what the writers are, it's a combination of a project between Oprah Winfrey and a guy who's both a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist. And, and if you decide you want to read it, plan on reading it slowly, okay? Because it's one of those, it's like, it pushes your buttons and, prompts you to think, but this neuroscience was able to look at a lot of situations, mostly behavioral, but a lot of situations and then go, okay, we can trace this back to something really, relatively obscure that you might gloss right over. So that's kind of thing number one. The title of the book is What Happened to You. I have 3 copies of it. Anybody want to come get it? You're more than welcome to get it. But the other thing though is, we've been talking about trauma on the side of the one that's been traumatized. There is a very simple statement out there, and it says, hurt people hurt people. So when you have that discussion about, racial animus, sexual animus, whatever, it's kind of like, well, what's going on with, at some point you got to examine what's going on with the person who's, pushing this pain out there in the world. I mean, that's kind of, that's the question that when we start asking that question, but it's a scary question. It's because you have to begin to own stuff about history. It's like, what kind of traumatizing event was being on the Mayflower for however long it took to get here? What kind of traumatizing event was it, dealing with, and, doing a historical look on things. And maybe we'll do this again some other time, but, a historical look on things. It's like, go back to the time of, serfs in Europe. You don't think those were abusive situations? It's, I mean, there's all of the stuff that, this conversation that needs to be had that, we're not having. But I hope, my hope is built on nothing less than, there's a song, than Jesus' love and righteousness. I'm gonna go to my next appointment if I'm a little bit late.
Thank you, Reverend Phil. Very helpful, very informative, and for sharing. Very helpful. Thank you, and very informative. And we'll see you next week for the teen empowerment presentation. Sorry, thank you.